seem possible to make everybody believe the same thing. Even if you have a very strong boss, that's hard to do. But when it's coming up from the grassroots, there's no way to change it. So anyway, what happened next? My husband was really concerned about issues like works theology. We believe we're saved by our works, and Father Peter would say no, and you read this passage in Matthew and this one in Mark, and St. Athanasius commenting on that passage, and Chrysostom commenting on that passage. And my husband was impressed that he did not give his opinion, rather he was able to point him to the scriptures and to the church fathers. So Father Peter said, go to a service and see what you think. And because he was still working on Sunday mornings, he went to a Saturday evening Vespers service at an Orthodox church in Baltimore. And I'm gonna read you just the first two paragraphs of my book, Facing East, and describe, he went that Saturday, came back having completely fallen in love. The following Saturday, I went back with him. So this is that following Saturday. He was an Episcopal priest, but he was standing in an Orthodox church on this Saturday night and thinking about truth, capital T. At the altar, a gold-robed priest strode back and forth, swinging incense, moving in and out of the doors of the iconostasis, according to rubrics that were as yet unfamiliar. Golden bells chimed against the censer, and the light was smoky and dim. Over to the left, a small choir was singing in haunting harmony, voices twining in a cappella simplicity. The truth part was this. The ancient words of this Vespers service have been chanted for more than a millennium. Lex orandi, lex credendi, it's Latin, that means the law of prayer is the law of faith. What people pray shapes what they believe. This was a church that had never and could never apostatize. She was his wife, and she was standing next to him thinking about her feet. They hurt. She wondered why they had pews if you have to stand up all the time. The struggling choir was weak and singing in an unintelligible language that may have been English. The few other worshipers weren't participating in the service in any visible way. That really bugged me when I was new to the Orthodox, because I was used to the evangelical thing where you get the big smile and you're just emoting, and a lot of times when Orthodox people are prayerful, they just get real quiet, and I thought, you're not really praying. I was very judgmental about that. Why did they hide the altar behind a wall? It was annoying how the priest kept popping in and out of the doors like a figure on a Swiss clock. The service dragged on following no discernible pattern, and it was interminable. Once the priest had said, "Let us conclude our evening prayer to the Lord." She checked her watch again. That was 10 minutes ago. There's still no end in sight. So I really didn't like the Orthodox Church at first. And in fact, this appears to be a pattern. I had a priest tell me not too long ago, and we've sure found it true in our parish. The priest said, when a couple comes to me and they want to talk about Orthodoxy, possibly converting, if one of them wants to be Orthodox and the other doesn't, 80% of the time, it's the husband that wants to be Orthodox, the wife that doesn't. There is something about Orthodoxy that attracts men, or men get it. It's like, I know this song, they just plunge right in, it feels like home. I think especially if they feel like the church they've been going to is too feminine, that it's too focused on taking care of you or your emotions, making you happier. It's kind of focused on the worshiper rather than God. Instead of the pastor and the worship team worshiping, they try to plan a way to give the congregation a good worship experience. It's like it's a consumer. And that is what really grabs me about Orthodoxy, is we're all, standing up for most of the service. We're all facing the same direction, and it is 100% about God. A funny thing about that is it's very unself-conscious. There's not a feeling, even for the people at the altar, that it's a performance. One of our friends told us that when he was still an Episcopal priest, one Sunday he left his service book on the other side of the altar, And now he was so far from it, and so he couldn't think of any liturgically appropriate way to get the book back. He said, now I'm Orthodox, I know what to do. I just walk over there and get it. C.S. Lewis talks about this in a letter where he says he went to an Orthodox church, and he was so impressed because people ignored each other. Some people make the sign of the cross, some don't, some are standing, some are sitting. Somebody comes in and goes over to the wall and starts praying in front of an icon while the service is going on. He said it was wonderful how nobody was judging anybody else. Nobody really cared how anybody else was worshiping. It was just focused on the Lord and responding to the Lord from the heart. Well, that took a little getting used to for me. I tried to talk my husband out of becoming Orthodox because I really didn't understand it. I thought it was too foreign, it was too old-fashioned, and it just didn't have the emotional warmth that I was used to. So I argued against it, and I would sometimes say, maybe we're supposed to stay in the Episcopal Church, you know. When the Titanic was going down, God needed chaplains on the Titanic. And even if we think that these are the last days for this church, maybe we're supposed to stay. This is your congregation, your flock here at this church, and maybe we're supposed to just be there for them. And it stymied him for a while, until one day he said, you know what God needed on the Titanic? More lifeboats. He said, there's a ship over there that is not going down. The best thing we can do for this flock is get them in the lifeboats, get them over to the other church. So, yeah, so he won. A very good rule we've had always in our marriage is the person who cares most intensely about it is the one who wins. If we're going to do something or not do it. Usually that's me, so it's a really great rule. This is one of those rare cases where the shoe was on the other foot, and he really wanted to be Orthodox, and he was at the point of saying, even if I couldn't be a priest, and I knew he was called to the priesthood, even if I had to sell books or shoes or something, I just have to be Orthodox. And he was intense about it, and I was not intensely hating it. It was like, I don't get this at all. But I said to him, I trust you. You've never led me wrong yet. You see something that I don't see, but I believe you really see something. So I said, okay, we'll be christening. And that was January 1993, so it'll be our 20th anniversary come next January. In our family, it was my husband and the two teenage boys that were gung-ho, let's do this. And it was me and my daughter, who was then 16, who were like, this is weird, this is a weird church. But for both of us, the day of our chrismation, it was a Saturday, it was like during the course of the service, we both got it. It just, and we'd been to services before, but this one somehow, it was the beauty of it and the profundity of it became so real to us that I remember leaving and thinking, I don't want it to end. I could stay here all day and this worship. This was so wonderful. Driving home, my daughter said, can we stop at the mall? And I just want to walk around and tell people I'm Orthodox. So, not to keep you too late, I've been chatting for a while here. Holy Cross Church is a church we founded. I'll just give you a brief update. We bought a building in 1997, and it's a small building. So when we start to crowd it out at about 140, 150 people, we start a mission. So we've helped start 3 missions at this point, south, north, and west of us. And it's thriving, it's growing. It's when we started, we were a lot of families with children, all different ages. And the funny thing is that as the churches continue to grow, the average age is getting lower and lower and lower. We're having younger couples or single people get married or have their first baby. And there's, a friend of mine told me we have an average of about 90 because we had another mission to start 90, and 20 of them are under 2 years old. So it's a very young congregation, and people just coming from all different directions, mostly converts. One of the real blessings of Orthodoxy today is that there has been, ever since Father Peter Gilchrist, a continuing flood of converts to where the Metropolitan of the Orthodox Church in America, one of the biggest Orthodox bodies in America, told me not long ago, 50% of his people are converts at this point. And in my church, the Antiochian Church, I read that 78% of the clergy are converts. 78%. So it's a wonderful moment because these are people who've chosen the church, who know what they're getting into, who've read about it, they've studied it, and they're on fire for it. So all of that is really leading to revival. It's not necessarily always in revival, but it's a nice moment right now. This is the latest chapter in the Bible. As I said, your story is being written. You know, our story is being written. One day we'll get up there and we'll see this endless Bible, and we'll see the chapters where my church was founded and how it grew over the years. It comes back full circle into the individual lives. It's not just a philosophy, it's not just a theory, but it's actual living people that are transformed and filled with the Holy Spirit and with His power. The saints, you are called to be a saint. We're all called to be saints. If you don't become a saint, the philosopher Jean Blois said, the only tragedy is not to become a saint. There's an old sermon illustration about the pastor asked the little girl, what is a saint? And she thought about the stained glass windows in her church, and she said, a saint is somebody that the light shines through. And one of the things I like about that is that image is the brighter the light gets, the more different the saints look from each other. If you went by the church at night, you might see what looks like there's saints in the window, but you can't tell them apart. The brighter the light in you, the more individual you will become, the more your uniqueness will show, the more confidence you will have in how special you are as an individual and the calling that God has on your life that is no one else's calling. It's like we're each little glass lanterns, and God's plan in the kingdom of heaven is that every one of our lanterns has a different color, a slightly different shade. And if you fail to become a saint, you have the power to eternally deprive the kingdom of God of that particular shade, that particular radiance that you are appointed to bring. So this is not just about me. You know, it's not just about the saints that are in our windows and in our icons. This is about you. Don't think small. You are called to be a light-bearing saint. You are called to be a light-bearing saint in the kingdom of God. I'm going to close with one of my very favorite scriptures, a description of the company of the saints. And it's Hebrews 11:32 to 12:2. As I read this paragraph, you'll notice that some of these, that it changes partway through. It begins where he's talking about lives of people famous and successful and victorious, and then it changes and it begins to be about lives of suffering. Lives that, from the perspective of the world, look like failure, look like loss. And yet all of these lives are part of that endless story, the eternal story that God is writing in human history. Your life is part of this story too. In the expanded Bible, it won't end where I end tonight. It'll just go on, and your name will be there too. Hebrews 11:32 to 12:2. For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, received promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection, and some were tortured, refusing to accept release that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and scourging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering over deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Thank you. I went on longer than I planned. I'd like to take some question and answer. Do you have like a target time to wrap it up? And if you need to leave, I won't be offended because it is 9. So yeah. Oh, that's so great. For my body, it's 9 o'clock. I'm okay. Phew. All right. So it looks like when we finish the Q&A, it looks like there's some refreshments, coffee, and I'll sit at a table. They'll be selling books and I'll sign books. But let's, if you have any questions or any comments, I'd love to do that now. Yes.
When you had the radio on in the church when Jesus spoke to you, was there someone in your life that you know was praying for Jesus?
That's a good question. It was, in case you couldn't hear in the back, she said when I had that experience in the Dublin church, was there somebody in my life that I knew was praying for me? I have suspicions. Nobody in my immediate family was like an evangelical Christian, but some of them were quietly Christian. I feel sure they were praying for me. And I had a very powerful great-grandfather that we only overlapped 2 months, but he was a missionary evangelist who went down the Amazon, he was a dentist. I think he prayed for all of us. And although we were raised in a home where my mother was an atheist and my father was just a nominal Christian, my sister and I have very strong faith today. And I think I give the credit to my great-grandfather, Dad, whom if I saw him, I was just 2 years old, 2 months old. Yeah, prayer works. Prayer works. Keep on praying. Any other?